Hey guys, I'm back with Texas Longhorn football. Um, Season starts this coming Saturday. Thankfully and finally, September 1st will be the official start date. Um, we're gonna open up the season against Wyoming. So, and again, there's really only so much you can say about the opening game of the year. Texas opens with Wyoming and New Mexico. I highly doubt we're going to find a way to lose either of those two games. It's really just like exhibition games for, the good teams have those most of the time so that you can sort of shake off some of the rust. I am interested to see Texas against Wyoming though. Wyoming isn't too bad. Um, they're probably it's not like opening the season with Rice. Wyoming's, a team who could, maybe get 6 wins and play in one of those really bad bowl games like the Meineke Car Care Bowl or, something like that. Excuse me. But it's still interesting to see how they fare against, a mediocre team, I guess. We already know about the defense. We only returned 6 starters off last year's defense, which really isn't that great. But a lot of the guys who will be stepping up and taking place of starters from last year are still guys who played a ton. Um, Adrian Phillips and Kenny Vaccaro both sort of switched on and off in that off safety position that wasn't being filled by senior Blake Gideon last year. So we know that both of those guys are pretty well going to get the job done, especially Kenny Vaccaro. And then Chris Whaley and Ashton Dorsey are guys who both played quite a bit last year on the offensive line, and of course, so did Alex Okafor, Jackson Jeffcoat, our starting defensive ends. So defensively, there's really not a whole lot of question marks for this team that I'm looking at. We did lose Keenan Robinson and Emmanuel Acho, which is a pretty big blow for the team, honestly, because those were two really good, I mean, really, really good starting um, linebackers, and they were seniors, and they had been in the system for a long time. Keenan Robinson started since he was a freshman back in 2008 when we made the Fiesta Bowl against Ohio State with Colt McCoy and all that. He was starting with Earl Thomas, Brian Rackpo, those guys. So that'll be a big blow for us. I'm not really sure what we're going to have at the offensive line position because our projected starters are, of course, Jordan Hicks, who we know is going to be really solid and good. But then I believe Steve Edmond is projected to start at the middle linebacker position, and our other, I forget who it escapes me. I'm looking at their depth chart now, but I can't remember who the other starter was supposed to be. Last name of Cobbs. I forget what the first name is. But so we might be a little shaky there at the offense or at the linebacker position, but um, again, Kenny Vaccaro is a type of we have a lot of DBs, Josh Turner, Carrington Bindum, Quandre Diggs, and of course the aforementioned Kenny Vaccaro and Quandre Diggs. So we've got a lot of those guys. I think you'll probably see us go with a lot of two linebacker sets. And then Kenny Vaccaro, a lot of times, I'm going to guess will play up and can kind of be that um, other linebacker, uh, sort of a linebacker safety duo. I know Oklahoma State had a guy a few years back. I forget his name, um, but he did the same thing. He was really a combination linebacker safety, and I think that's kind of what Kenny Vaccaro will be able to do for us. anyway, so defensively, I think we're really sound, and there's really not a whole lot of question marks. Last year was our 5th straight year leading the Big 12 in total defense, so I think this year will be our 6th. Offensively, it's strange that that's a question mark for us because of how many starters we returned. A bunch of guys on the offensive line are coming back. We really are probably going to have, in my estimation, a pretty solid defensive line. I mean, when you think about some of the guys that we're getting back, they're guys that are there when we went 5-7. So that was our first year trying to really run the ball a lot. So when you think about that, I think we're probably gonna, and then they were back again last year, and so I think we're probably gonna be pretty solid up front on the offensive line. And then of course in the backfield, we don't really know how good Jonathan Gray is going to end up being, but he's a highly hyped freshman who, from highlights I've seen and people I've heard talk about him, seems like he's pretty legit. And of course, we know Joe Bergeron and Malcolm Brown are going to be very good. And I think we're going to see a big leap this year from last year with these guys, because last year David Ash, Joe Bergeron, Malcolm Brown, Jackson Shipley, all true freshmen just coming in. Texas, I think, had the second most freshmen out of any team in the country last year. And a lot of them played. A lot of them played. So it will be interesting to see what the leap is for these guys this year, because they played all season last year. They took their licks at times, getting smacked around by Oklahoma. And then there were games where they really fought hard and just could not come out on top, like Kansas State, Missouri, Oklahoma State. And then again, we got smacked around by Baylor in RG3. So it will be interesting to see what kind of leap they make after taking their licks last year. And then there were times where they really dug in and couldn't quite get it done, but they fought hard all the way to the end. And then there were a few games last year, obviously, where they got the job done for us. Games like BYU, Texas A&M, where they came out, played hard defensively, and they're really the only reason we won. Like against California, in the bowl game, our offense played terrible, but our defense played fantastic. Forced 5 turnovers, got a bunch of sacks, got the job done. And now it's time to get to the elephant in the room, if you will, because our quarterback position. David Ash has been named the starter. You all know my opinion on this one if you saw any of my videos from last year. Based on what I saw last year, Case McCoy should be the starter. I mean, really, truthfully, Case McCoy should be the starter. I love Colt McCoy, and so I was a little bit prejudiced coming in with Case McCoy, saying, "Oh, he's McCoy, I want him to play, and he's going to be amazing." He's not Colt McCoy. He's not that good. Okay, bottom line, he's got the name that can instill fear into his opponents, but they never really let him loose last year. And when you look at the difference between Case McCoy and David Ash, David Ash threw a touchdown pass against California, and it had been his first touchdown pass since October. He went 2 months without completing a touchdown pass, okay? And when you look at what David Ash did last year, okay, he came against BYU, he ran the ball a few times, threw a pass or two, he was all right. But really, Case McCoy was the reason we came back and beat BYU. UCLA, Case McCoy started, was absolutely fantastic, played a great game, very Colt McCoy-esque game, and we killed UCLA. David Ash came against Iowa State. He played pretty well, but that's really his only game in the year that you can say he played well. Came against Oklahoma. Obviously, he played terrible against Oklahoma. Oklahoma State, he really didn't do that well. Excuse me. Missouri, he got benched at one point for Case McCoy because he wasn't playing well. Kansas State threw a couple of interceptions, got benched for Case McCoy again. And of course, we won 2 games with David Ash as a starter, Kansas and um, Texas Tech, Kansas, Texas Tech. But those were 2 games that we ran the ball like you wouldn't believe against those 2 teams. And I'm going to read you the stats real quick. Beat Kansas 43-0. David Ash, 14 of 18, 145 yards, no touchdown, interception. So those stats, I guess they're nothing to complain about, especially when Kansas quarterback was 7 of 16 for 48 yards. So in comparison, it's pretty good. And I guess that's an all right game if you're going to go run first, but you'd still like to see a little bit more. But again, that was a game where they were able to run the ball, without much of a problem. They were able to run the ball without a whole lot of resistance at all. So, I guess I'll give him that one. But still, he was able to play well only because the running game worked, not because he was actually able to open up and do well before. And of course, against Texas Tech, 4-7 for 125 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. So, yeah. Obviously, that's not the type of game you want to have. And even against California, with a month to prepare in the game, Ash still only had 145 yards throwing on 14 of 23 throwing. So, not that great. He had a receiving touchdown, so that's one thing he can do. He caught a few passes last year. But based on what I saw last year, I would still like to see Case McCoy as a starter. Case McCoy had a much higher completion percentage last year. Threw more touchdown passes. Had one bad game where he let loose for 4 interceptions, but he still had 4 less interceptions than David Ash did last year. He's better at just those short to intermediate passes, which are really the kind of passes you're going to live with. If you're a run-first offense, you drop back, you take the defense off guard for just a split second by deciding to pass and not run. You get a quick strike out there for 4, 5, 6 yards. That's all you need, especially if you're running the ball efficiently. But David Ash liked throwing the ball downfield. Maybe that's just because he was a young guy. A lot of young guys seem to have an issue with that. But I would like to see Case McCoy as a starter, but I don't think it's going to happen. But as good as our run game should be, and as fantastic as our defense will be, I think even if either starter made intermediate changes and improvements, I think we can be a BCS team, no matter who starts. And based on what I saw in the spring game, David Ash played way better than Case McCoy did. He was making those short intermediate passes. He was, had better pocket awareness than he did last year. And I think part of that's just, the transformation from freshman to where you're still kind of used to high school to sophomore and where you've had a year of experience. So I think David Ash can get the job done for us. I'd like to see McCoy out there slinging passes to a guy named Shipley, but for the most part, I think we'll be solid where we are, even if Ash plays. And I think that not this year, but probably next year, we could be a BCS championship contender. I don't know that we'll be a championship contender this year. We might be. I think if we pick a quarterback this year and stick with him no matter who it is, the next year we will be a championship contender. Because for the last couple of years, really since the year we won the championship, we've just been reloading defensively. Actually, really since about 2 years before we won the championship, Texas just started having that innate ability to reload defensively. Um, and a lot of teams don't have that because they like to play one guy at each position. That's pretty much it. Texas is really about too deep at most positions and that gives us an advantage both this year essentially and the next year because um, we're fresh and got a lot of guys to rotate in and out, and then the next year those guys have experience. Anyway, this has been the longest monologue about football ever, but my projection for Texas 10-2. Obviously, we play a tough schedule. Just being in the Big 12. We play five top 25 teams, so that'll be a challenge. But I think we will win. I think we will go 10-3, 11-2, or 10-3. One of those two, I think. But I think we'll be back to our 10-win seasons. I think we'll beat Oklahoma State. They lost a lot of guys off last year's team. A lot of their high-powered guys, and they're a team who defensively, even last year we put up a lot of points on them. So I'm not really sold on their defense being able to slow down our run game that much. And I know our defense has the ability. We'll be able to slow down their offense. So I think we'll get that one. West Virginia, I don't know. They've got a real high-powered offense, but if we can contain their quarterback, then that's really all we have to do to slow down that offense because everything sort of revolves around him running the option, him completing short intermediate passes, and he's still a young guy, so if we can rattle him a little bit, we might be able to just throw him off. Oklahoma, they still got Landry Jones. They don't have Aaron Boyles, but they've still got some good receivers in that core, some good guys for him to throw to. That'll be another good game. Unfortunately, I see ourselves coming out of that one on the wrong end for the third straight year. Pains me to say, but I think that's how it's going to happen. And we got really the good thing is that we have like 5 really tough games, and the rest of them are sort of gimmies. The rest of them really aren't too challenging. Ole Miss may present a bit of a challenge, but yeah. But the next game is TCU, and I really don't know a whole lot about TCU, but I think that I think they're going to have a tough time adapting to playing really solid teams week in and week out. This being their first year in the Big 12. Because they're not used to that. They're used to playing. I'll give them something that Boise State never had. Boise State would play one tough non-conference game at home, and that was it all year. So I didn't have a whole lot of respect for Boise State or their quarterback. I forget his name now, who beat Colt McCoy's record for most wins as a starting quarterback in FBS. So screw him. He played in the crappiest conference known to mankind. McCoy played in a BCS conference. But I think TCU have a tough time adapting to that, and against this high-powered defenses that they're going to be facing every single week, and offenses too. So I think we'll be able to come out on that one. And then of course Kansas State, who just has, and right now I've got ourselves, likely at this point with only one loss. We'll probably lose to Kansas State just because they have such a history for ruining our seasons and turning a fantastic season into just a more of a mediocre season. So I'll give ourselves a loss to the. If we're 11-1, I say we lose to them. Or if we're 10-1 at that point, I say we lose to Kansas State just because they have that knack for beating us when we could really use a win. And if we already have 2 or 3 losses at this point, I doubt we'll have 3, but if we have 2 losses at this point, I think we'll be able to beat them, just because it won't mean as much. But we'll see. Kansas State, they do have a very stout defense coming in, and a pretty high-powered offense as well. So we'll see. My prediction, 11-2 or 10-3. My prediction. We'll see. Longhorns, Texas fight.